Hey, everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about some galactic astrology stuff. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the Great Attractor today. I did do a video about the Great Attractor back in September of 2021. Now it's November of 2024. Time just like goes. Time is just like, it's crazy to me how fast time goes. But I wanted to do a video about the Great Attractor because this year, I mean, this galactic stuff is always on my mind, whether that's the galactic center, the super galactic center, the great attractor, the Shapley, whatever. The galactic points are always on my mind, even if I'm not always talking about them. And I'm always working on this stuff behind the scenes, even if I'm not actually making videos about it. I know a lot in 2021, I was making like a whole bunch of videos about the GC. And it probably seems like I've calmed down with that, maybe in the making videos arena, but not in my actual research. It's still very, very much researched behind the scenes, if you will. But this year, there have been a lot of people, clients that have come to me that have had things conjunct the Great Attractor and the Shapley Attractor and the Dipole Repeller. Not necessarily all three of those, but conjunctions to one or some of those. And they've known that they've had that, and they wanted me to really dive into that. Also, in the past, I've been asked, are you ever going to do a questionnaire about the attractors, the way that you have the questionnaire about the Galactic Center and Friends or the Galactic Grand Cross? Well, there is a questionnaire now for the Shapley Attractor, the Great Attractor, and the Dipole Repeller. If you would like to get a hold of this, you can shoot me an email at ellie@saturnseason.com or saturnseason@gmail.com, and I will get you the questionnaire. Just to throw this out there, though, as far as the Great Attractor goes, I am looking at an orb of 7 degrees applying and separating from the Great Attractor. Currently, right now, the Great Attractor is at 14 degrees, 17 minutes of Sagittarius. I think when I did the original video that I did on the Great Attractor, I think the Great Attractor was at like 14 degrees, 10 minutes. It moves very, very slow. You can actually pull it in your own chart, see where it was when you were born. It's probably at 13 degrees something for most of y'all. I know it is for me, because of how slow it moves. I think it moves a degree every like 72 years or something like that. So for most of y'all watching this that are old enough to watch this, it's old enough, old enough to watch this. It was probably in the, 13 degrees in the high minutes of Sagittarius when you were born. But to pull it in your chart, go to astro.com, extended chart selection, where you would go to like pick the sort of chart that you want to pull, that sort of thing. Then you go to additional objects down towards the bottom of this page. Under additional objects, you would go to fixed stars. Now, the Great Attractor is not a fixed star, just like the Galactic Center is not a fixed star, but that's how they have them labeled, because they move very, very slow. They do move though, but they move very, very slow. Like fixed stars move very, very slow. So go to the fixed stars part under additional objects, click that, and then go down to G and look for GA, and that is the Great Attractor. Pull that, click it, then pull the chart. Great Attractor will pop up in your chart. That's how you pull it. And like I said, I'm looking for an orb. I'm looking at an orb of 7 degrees applying and separating. So like with the Great Attractor currently at it's not 17, 14 degrees, 17 minutes of Sagittarius, I'd be looking at like 7 degrees Sagittarius to 21 degrees of Sagittarius. That would be the orb for conjunctions, window of orb for conjunctions that I'm looking at. It was whiter. I was doing 10 degrees applying and separating at first. When I first, started really, really, really researching this over 3 years ago. I brought it in since. I might end up bringing it in more over time. I could see that happening. I have not done that with the Galactic Center yet, but I could see myself bringing it in even more as time goes on, because it has felt right to do that. So if you would like to be a part of this brand spanking new questionnaire, and it is like brand spanking new, it's only a couple months old. If you would like to be a part of the research, volunteer as tribute, if you have planets within that window of orb, or even, Shapley, let me also throw out there the Shapley Attractor, which is also on the questionnaire. 2 degrees Scorpio, Dipole Repeller, 2 degrees Taurus. They're opposing each other, and the Great Attractor is in Sagittarius. If you have planets, within 7 degrees applying and separating of these points, shoot me an email, ellie@saturnseason.com or saturnseason@gmail.com. The other thing I want to mention, in the comments this year, I've gotten a lot of people asking questions like, do you do readings? This kind of stuff. Yes, I do. I absolutely do readings. I do astrology readings. I will put the link in the description box below where you can find me for a reading. I do regular astrology readings. I incorporate the weird shit like the galactic stuff if you want me to. Not everybody does. Some people really, really want me to. So whatever you want me to do, if it's something that I practice, I can do it. Again, I'll put the link in the description box below where you can find me for a reading, but the website is saturnseason.com. Okay, just wanted to get those couple of things out of the way real fast. Now we're going to talk about the Great Attractor. I'm also going to be reading from, not straight reading from my blog post that I did about this, but just a couple of things to streamline it. So I hear, okay. So the Great Attractor is a galactic anomaly. Scientists don't really seem to know what the hell it is. Let me also throw out there, if you're looking for a video about like a scientific video about the Great Attractor, this isn't it. I mean, I do try to take the science of it and apply it to an astrology chart. And I do like to look at the science of it to do this, but this is not like a NASA video of the Great Attractor or whatever. Like if you're looking for something more like strictly science-based, you probably not at the right place. But if you're interested, if you find this interesting so far, by all means, keep watching it. But if you are looking for something more science-based, I might go elsewhere. Also, if you have opinions about what I'm doing, or you think what I'm doing is stupid or what I'm talking about is stupid, I've gotten comments before about that. People leaving like asshole comments. You can go ahead and do that. I won't engage with you, but I'll leave your asshole comment up in all of its glory so people can see what a fucking asshole you are. And I won't engage with you beyond that, other than leaving it up. So I guess I'm just throwing that out there because if you're going to do that, I don't give a shit. Okay, so back to the Great Attractor. It is a scientific anomaly. It is a deep space anomaly. Nobody really seems to know what it is. They didn't know what it was in 2021. Still don't know what it is in 2024. I'm not sure that they'll even know what it is 3 years from now, whatever. It functions like a black hole, but it is not a black hole. It does not, it does appear to, warp time and space and light the way that a black hole does. But it has no event horizon. Black holes have an event horizon. This one does not. So it can't be classified as a black hole. Or it doesn't, it doesn't meet the standard definition or criteria for a black hole. Yeah, I have here in my blog that the Great Attractor appears to be pulling different superclusters of galaxies towards it, and scientists believe that our own galaxy supercluster is also being pulled towards it. So it is doing pulling. Now, another thing to mention here is that scientists also seem to think that the Great Attractor is actually a part of the Shapley Attractor or the Shapley supercluster. Now, what's interesting about this to me is, like, okay, anybody that's watched like the GC videos that I've done, the Galactic Center videos, there is, I mean, I do think that there is a polarity to everything. There is. Like the Galactic Center, I was like, there's something else there, right? Sure as shit there is. The Galactic Anti-Center does exist. These, but I've got to say, like with the Great Attractor, it has never bothered me that there doesn't appear to be an opposing something opposite. It's never bothered me that does seem to be the case, and that's kind of weird, which does make me wonder if it actually could be a part of the greater Shapley supercluster, if you will, because Shapley does have an opposite point, which would be the dipole repeller. These are not things that I'm making up either. The dipole repeller actually exists. This isn't just some random shit that I pulled out of my ass that I'm making up. This actually is a real thing in the sky, in space. So that kind of makes sense to me. If I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's why it has never bothered me that the Great Attractor doesn't have this opposite point. If it's actually a part of the Shapley supercluster, part of the greater Shapley supercluster, if you will. So I'm like, I don't know. Scientists don't really know. Do I think that it's very possible? Absolutely. I think it is. Scientists also seem to think it is, but they don't, I mean, they don't really know. So, but it's essentially that the Great Attractor, part of Shapley or not, part of it or not, the Great Attractor is pulling things towards it. It is doing this pulling, attracting things towards it. So it does seem to me that when, and it seemed to me even then in 2021, when I first started really diving into the research about it, that I'm looking at making sure that I touch on everything on my blog post. I do think that the Great Attractor in a chart, people that have planets, angles, whatever, asteroids, whatever you might have conjunct the Great Attractor. I do think that the person is pulling things towards them. Now, I think this happens regardless if the person is aware that they're doing this or not. This attractive force, though, I think is always happening. I think it's always happening. Now, unlike Shapley, the Great Attractor does feel like a more benevolent force or attractive force. Now, that doesn't always have to be the case, but generally speaking, when I think of the Great Attractor, it is easier than, like, the things that are attracted, that the person might attract are easier than the things somebody with something conjunct Shapley might attract. Shapley just feels more difficult. We might get into that. I've talked about that in a video before as well, but I do think that with the Great Attractor, the things that are attracted do generally tend to be easier in nature. So I do think of it in a more benevolent way than I do Shapley, but at the same time, I don't think of Shapley as like some bad thing, because I really think that, like, the things that are attracted through Shapley can also be good. I just think in order to utilize the good of Shapley, you probably have to attract a little bad. Good, bad, I know all these are very, like, relative. So I put it in quotes because, like, does good and bad really even exist? But yeah, so I do think that regardless of the person is conscious of what they're attracting or not, they are always attracting things. Like we say, somebody with Mercury conjunct the Great Attractor, always attracting thoughts, say, thoughts, things like that. They are an attractive force with that. Might be an attractive force for information, like attracting information to them. Mercury ties in with information. They could easily attract information to them. Things, along those lines. I think the attractive force ties in very much to whatever planet we're talking about. If we're talking about a planet, asteroid, if we're talking about an asteroid. If we're talking about an angle, say, like, I don't know, let's say you got the Great Attractor conjunct the Descendant. Relationships, there could be you could really be an attractive force in that way, attracting, like, relationships. Is that always good? I don't know, because, like, the Descendant is things that we attract into our lives. Just the Descendant by itself represent things that we attract into our lives, whether we like them or not. Like people that we attract into our lives. So it could be that somebody with, like, the Descendant conjunct the Great Attractor, they might attract relationships into their lives. They may not always like this. There's also something to be said about the shadow, though, here. Maybe they attract maybe they attract things that contribute to their shadow side. And by shadow here, I mean, like, it's like the shadow that, like a literal shadow on the ground. It's there, but you just kind of dismiss it, ignore it. You don't really care about it. That kind of stuff. It could also be that the things that you attract, in keeping with that, with the Descendant, it could also be the things that you attract, you just dismiss or ignore. That's also very possible with something like the Great Attractor conjunct the Descendant. But I do think that whatever you have going on, Great Attractor conjunct whatever in your chart, you are an attractive force pulling things that have to do with that angle, that planet, that asteroid, whatever. into your life. Oh, yeah. And it seems like when this attractive force starts, this is why it's important to know what you're attracting and to be in control of it. And for some people, this will be easier than others. Like if you've got the Great Attractor in the 12th house, this is more unconscious. Like it is going to be harder, generally speaking, harder to make this conscious. But I do think that once you start attracting things, when that's turned on, I think it can be hard to stop the ball rolling. I think it can be hard to stop the ball rolling with it. So I think it is important to try to understand what you might be attracting consciously or unconsciously into your life. What are you attracting? And, I feel like by doing that, if you're able to do that, you can make it more conscious. That way you can utilize this to attract what you want into your life. And this does sound kind of law of attraction-y. And there is a little bit of that here, but I don't think it's just like thoughts. It's not just thoughts. Now with Mercury, it might be. If Mercury conjunct the Great Attractor, and it might be really more of like a what you think you attract. But with other planets, it might function a little differently than that. But I do think that there is sort of this attractive force. And maybe even every once in a while, a little bit, be careful what you wish for, not necessarily that you're wishing for it, but like be careful what you are attracting. Because it's like once you get that ball rolling with that attraction, it can be hard to, I think, shut it off, to stop the ball rolling. So do keep that in mind. It's kind of like if there's something that you want, like let's say you've got Venus conjunct the Great Attractor. Venus can, express relationships. It can. So you got Venus conjunct the GA, and there's some sort of relationship that you're really wanting. I might also say, Venus conjunct the descendant, whatever. You're really wanting to attract some kind of relationship into your life. I'd make sure it's really what you want. Understand that it's really what you want, so you attract what you want in that way. Because I think if you're not, it is possible to attract things that you don't actually maybe, a little bit, like, be careful what you wish for, be careful what you attract. So I do think it's important to like understand as much as possible, what you are attracting and what you want when working with this. Now also with this one does seem to, I have here in my in my blog post, the Great Attractor seems to be less polarizing than the Galactic Center and the Galactic Grand Cross. Some of this is probably because there doesn't appear to be anything opposite the Great Attractor, so there isn't an opposition to cause any polarity in the first place. That would also be another reason, because there is no polarity there. There is no opposition point. If it is a part of Shapley kind of takes the polarizing or the more difficult aspects of this, if you will. Shapley, I think, can be incredibly polarizing. It has that ability, but the Great Attractor, not so much. Bringing this down to the astrology chart, though, the person with the conjunctions to the bringing this down to the astrology chart, the person with conjunctions to the GA seems not to be seen as polarizing, or that specific part of their chart is not seen as polarizing. For instance, Venusian, let's say somebody has Venus conjunct the GA. Venusian, for the person with Venus conjunct the GA, just throwing this out there as an example because it's what I used here. The person with Venus conjunct the GA may not, Venusian expressions, or Venusian, or however you pronounce that, expressions may not be thought of at all as polarizing by other people. This could be because the native really doesn't approach Venus notions and expressions in a polarizing way, which is absolutely possible. Or it could be because another person just doesn't see the Venus conjunct GA person as being polarizing. But there does seem to be, and this is another reason for sort of the benevolence, or the thought of this being a more benevolent attractor. Um, there does seem to be this thing that I've noticed within not so much the questionnaire because it is so new, but like with clients that I've had over the years, things like that, that people generally do seem to respond well to the person with great attractor conjunctions or a conjunction to the great attractor. It might just be one thing. People do seem to respond well to these people. By and large, that is not always the case, though. That is absolutely not universal. But people generally do seem to respond well to these people. Another thing, a lot of the people that I've clients, even people like that I know in my personal life, friends, family, whatever, conjunctions to the great attractor do seem to kind of give a certain kind of charisma or zazazoo or something. These people have something and something. This was very vague. I think y'all probably know what I mean, though. Um, there is something about them that they exude this, which I think this also can make that benevolence exist more, especially in regard to whatever planet, angle, asteroid, whatever we're talking about, especially in regards to that. There is definitely like a charisma to it. Even if we're talking about a planet like, say, Saturn, that doesn't, we don't tend to think of Saturn as very charismatic. That Saturn might actually have some charisma to it. Yeah. Okay, so the last point I have in my thing, the person with something conjunct the great attractor seems to have something about them that causes other people to see what they need to see in the person regarding the planet, etc., conjunct the great attractor. This is another reason why these people may come off as not polarizing regarding the planet, etc., conjunct the great attractor, especially if the person or people on the outside needs to view the great attractor person as non-polarizing. That sounds really confusing. um, I realize that I'm like looking, I'm like, holy shit, what I wrote there. I mean, like, it makes sense, but it sounds confusing. I do think there is something about people with conjunctions to the great attractor where people see what they want or need to see in that person with the great attractor conjunction, especially in regards to whatever planet, angle, asteroid, etc., happens to be conjunct the great attractor. I do think there is something about this. Now, this one is the one place where it can also not, say, be so easy. Because if somebody wants or needs to see the great attractor person as a villain or as bad or whatever, I think they are easily able to do this to the great attractor person. Whether or not the great attractor person is actually a villain or not, it depends. It depends, but there is this need for, it does seem like, for people to see what they need to see with the great attractor person. I also have here, I'll read that last part again. This is another reason why these people may come off as not polarizing regarding the planet, etc., conjunct the great attractor, especially if the person on the outside needs to view the great attractor person as non-polarizing. This isn't the great attractor person making themselves seem a different way than they are, but more about how they are received by other people. There doesn't appear to be the manipulation or malice involved on the part of the great attractor person. Now, this can be a beneficial thing for the great attractor person or a not beneficial thing. It really depends on what is needed to be seen in the great attractor person by someone else. Regardless of what other people need to see in the great attractor person, it's most important that the planet conjunct great attractor person sees themselves and that planet conjunct the great attractor clearly and without a filter. And there can be something with this where the person, the great attractor is in the zone of avoidance in the sky. So you can't see it with like, you can't see it like you can other things in the sky. with regular light waves. So there is this thing about with the Great Attractor that I'm not sure that the person with stuff conjunct the Great Attractor, angle, asteroid, planet, whatever, they might not always see that planet clearly, or that asteroid clearly, or that angle clearly. That's why it's important that, it's most important, regardless of how anybody else sees the Great Attractor person, or really anybody. This kind of goes for anybody. Like, what matters is how we see ourselves. Really, what matters is how we see ourselves, the truth about ourselves, truth about, and while I do think this is true for everybody everywhere to a certain extent, for the Great Attractor person, I think it's very important that, regardless of what somebody else needs to see in them or ends up seeing in them because they need to see it, it's most important that the Great Attractor person sees that planet, that angle, that asteroid, et cetera, clearly. Because people are going, from what I have noticed with clients, people in my personal life, whatever, the few people that really have, because actually, even though a lot of people haven't done the questionnaire yet, there have been a lot of people that have given me information, just shooting me emails. Hey, let me tell you about this. People love to talk about the galactic stuff. And I'm more than happy to I'm like, yes, tell me, please tell me. But it does seem like a thing where, people see what they want to see in the Great Attractor person. It's not them changing anything. This isn't like some Gemini shit or Pisces shit. Pisces can be very fluxy and flexible. I'm not talking shit about either of these sign energies. This is just how they are. Pisces energy is very, very fluid, very changeable. Gemini energy as well, very adaptable. The changing, I think with Pisces can be a little less conscious. Gemini, I think it can be more conscious. But this isn't, but the difference here is this, with the Great Attractor, this isn't the person doing the changing. Now, there are things in the chart that might allude to that not being the case, right? But, if you got a lot of, say, Pisces stuff or a lot of Gemini stuff also in a chart, maybe that isn't so much a case. But, generally speaking, the Great Attractor, it's not changing. The person isn't doing this consciously. It really is more of other people seeing what they need to see or want to see in that Great Attractor person for whatever reason that they want to see it or need to see it. How this actually plays out for you personally does depend on, what house the Great Attractor is in, what house that planet is in, or angle or asteroid, whatever. Any planets that make aspects to it. You also want to bring into the equation, let's say it is Mercury conjunct the Great Attractor that you have going on. What houses have Gemini and have Virgo on the cusp? Those houses are going to flow into Mercury and the Great Attractors. You want to keep that in mind as well as you're doing this, as you're looking at all of this. Do keep that in mind as well. That's something that does tend to get left out, because all of those things are going to color that planet conjunct the Great Attractor. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to talk about in this. I think that's probably pretty good. I probably will do another video on this, but might also tie it in with the Shapley, because I do think if the Shapley Attractor is if the Great Attractor is part of the Shapley Attractor, which I think it very well could be. Nobody really knows, but I think it's possible. I think you can read them, look at them together. Now, they're not making an aspect. One is at 2 degrees Scorpio. Great Attractor is now at 14 degrees Sagittarius, 14, 17. So they're not making an aspect, but I do think, if they are, Great Attractor is part of the Shapley supercluster or Shapley Attractor, you probably should look at both, especially if you've got somebody with a planet angle, et cetera, conjunct Shapley, and a planet angle, et cetera, conjunct the Great Attractor. They should probably be looked at for sure. as some kind of, I don't really know how to word this, as some kind of like Shapley will have like an influence on the Great Attractor. Great Attractor, I think, could even have an influence on Shapley. That bird is loud. What you want? Right up there. Okay, he's like saying, bitch, you've talked too long. Okay. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and head off. But I will put a link in the description box where you can read the blog post if you want to. I will put a link in the description box where you can find me for a reading if you'd like to. And again, if you would like to be a part of the questionnaire, the research for the Great Attractor, shoot me an email, ellie@saturnseason.com or saturnseason@gmail.com. And I will see you all later.